trail day usually starts the same way. Clean air, a wide view, boots on dirt, and somewhere in a pocket or strapped to a helmet. A camera already running before anyone knows why it matters. For most of the history of hiking, that footage just captured scenery. A ridge line, a waterfall, a friend laughing at the summit. But the same devices people carry to hold on to a memory have started capturing something else entirely. The last seconds of a person's life, recorded by accident, by habit, by a phone that never got turned off in time. Some of these deaths were filmed outright, the fall itself sitting on a memory card by the time rescuers arrived. Others were never captured in the moment at all, and survive only because the trail around them was so heavily photographed that the place itself became the record. Both kinds belong here, and the line between them is thinner than most people assume. Here are 5 of the most disturbing trail deaths caught on camera. It is June 28, 2025, on the Pedra do Macaco trail in Macaco, a coastal city in the state of Rio de Janeiro in southeastern Brazil. Caio Rocha Aguiar Arabal, 44 years old, is hiking the route with a group that leads tours through the area. He works with them regularly, walking the trail again that Sunday partly to know it better, though he had not yet earned his formal guide license. Pedra do Macaco translates to monkey rock, and the name fits the shape of the outcrop that sits at the top of the trail. The hike itself takes less than an hour to complete, but the exposed rock at the summit is the reason people come. From up there, hikers get a clean view of the Macaco Lagoon and the mountain range behind it, the kind of shot that looks good on a phone screen and even better in person. There is no real barrier at the top, no fencing, no posted warning sign telling people to stay back from the edge. Officials would later say the summit has been the site of previous accidents, and that the difficulty of reaching it, combined with the total absence of signage, makes the climb riskier than it looks from below. Arabal reaches the top and climbs onto the exposed section of rock to take a photograph. Someone in the group is filming him do it, a woman standing nearby with her phone raised. As he finishes and starts to climb down, she can be heard on the recording telling him to be careful. Seconds later, he loses his footing. Investigators believe he tried to descend from the steeper side of the rock, the wrong side, the one that drops fastest and offers the least to hold on to. Whatever caused the misstep, his balance goes and he falls, dropping nearly 500 feet down the face of the outcrop. The recording keeps rolling. The woman's warning is already on the video by the time he starts to fall, and her scream comes right after it. The whole sequence caught in real time without her ever meaning to document a death. Word spreads through the group almost instantly. Emergency crews from the Macaco Civil Defense and the local fire department are called in, but the terrain works against them from the start. The area beneath the summit is thick with vegetation, steep and hard to reach by any direct path. It takes rescuers close to 4 hours to get to him, using ropes to climb down through the brush and eventually a helicopter to bring his body back up. One rescuer would later describe the operation as requiring repeated climbing procedures just to reach the site, let alone recover him from it. By the time they got to him, Arabal had died from his injuries. The case remains under investigation by Brazilian civil police, and much about the exact sequence of his descent is still unconfirmed. What is not in question is the footage. The warning and the fall exist together on video. A woman's voice telling a man to slow down seconds before gravity took the decision out of his hands. In the aftermath, authorities in Macaco repeated a message they had given before, and would likely give again. Stop climbing onto the exposed viewpoint for a photo. The lagoon and the mountains would still be there from a few feet back. Arabal would not be the first person to ignore that distance, and officials made clear he was unlikely to be the last. In the Superstition Mountains east of Apache Junction, Arizona, a 21-year-old hiker named Richard Jacobson set up camp on top of Flatiron with a close friend. The peak rises inside Lost Dutchman State Park, at the western edge of a range that sits within reach of the Phoenix Valley but feels like a different world once you climb into it, all jagged rock and steep drop-offs, a range with a long history of hikers who went up and never came back the way they planned. Jacobson and his friend were not among the reckless. By every account gathered afterward, the two young men were simply out enjoying the outdoors, camping on the peak the way plenty of hikers do, with no indication of risky behavior leading up to what happened next. Night settled over the mountain. The two had made camp on top of Flatiron, and at some point Jacobson decided he wanted a picture. The city lights of the valley spread out below him in the dark. He walked to the edge of the trail, phone or camera in hand, lining up a shot of the skyline in the background. Then he lost his footing. He fell, and he kept falling, dropping nearly 700 feet down the face of the peak before the mountain finally stopped him. His friend, still up top, was left alone in the dark with no way to reach him and no way to know for certain what he'd find if he tried. The call came in around 12:45 in the morning on a Monday. Jacobson's friend told dispatchers what had happened, that his companion had fallen from the peak. Officials with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office would later describe the call itself in plain terms. Nothing criminal in nature, no reckless behavior involved. Just two young men camping on a mountain, and then only one of them left standing at the top. Search and rescue crews mobilized in the dark, working their way toward the base of Flatiron with the help of an Arizona Department of Public Safety helicopter. The terrain down there does not make things easy. It took hours of coordinated effort between ground teams and the air crew before Jacobson's body was located and recovered from nearly 700 feet below where he'd been standing just a picture ago. What was left behind on top of that peak was his device, the same phone or camera he'd raised to catch the skyline, now holding whatever frame he managed to capture in the instant before he slipped. Investigators didn't need witnesses to piece together the final seconds. The evidence was already sitting there, waiting to be recovered along with everything else. A sergeant with the Pinal County Search and Rescue Team spoke to the moment with the kind of plain honesty that comes from having seen this mountain claim people before. The superstitions, he said, are stunningly beautiful, and they can be dangerous to even the most experienced hikers. That line carries weight because Jacobson wasn't some tourist who wandered up unprepared. He was camping on a summit at night, comfortable enough in that terrain to make it his campsite for the evening. The fall didn't come from carelessness in any obvious sense. It came from a single step toward the edge, a phone raised for one more shot of a view worth remembering, and a mountain that offered no second chances once his balance gave out. His friend walked away from that night carrying an image no photograph could hold, the sound of nothing where a person used to be. And on the device recovered from the peak, whatever Jacobson managed to frame in his last seconds remains part of the record now. Evidence of a moment that started as a keepsake and ended as the only trace of how he died. On July 13, 2024, a 20-year-old college student named Grace Roloff is descending the cables section of Half Dome in Yosemite National Park, California, with her father Jonathan a few feet away. She had just finished her second year at Arizona State University, on track to graduate early, and the two of them had reached the summit together before turning around to start back down. Half Dome sits above the valley floor like a broken coin standing on its edge, and the final stretch to the summit is the part that separates casual hikers from the ones willing to test their nerve. For 400 feet, the granite turns close to vertical, smoothed by decades of wind and boots, and the only thing keeping people upright is a pair of steel cables bolted into the rock, strung between wooden posts that hikers grip hand over hand as they climb. There is no trail in the normal sense up there, just cable, granite, and air. The route draws thousands of hikers a year, and by the time most of them reach the cables, they already have a phone or a camera out. It's one of the most photographed technical stretches in any national park in the country, a place where people stop mid-climb to capture the drop behind them. The valley shrinking into the distance, other hikers strung along the cable like beads on a wire. The crowding itself becomes part of the image, everyone documenting everyone else, all of them holding on to the same two lines of steel. They had chosen the day for its forecast, which called for mild conditions and only a small chance of rain. But as they started down the cables, a thunderstorm moved in fast, the kind that builds over the high country in a matter of minutes. Rain swept across the exposed granite and turned it slick. Somewhere on that descent, her grip on the wet cable failed. She fell, and her father could only watch it happen from a few feet up the same line. He scrambled down after her as fast as the cables would allow, calling out to her the whole way, telling her he was there, telling her he loved her. begging her to hold on to something. He described the moment afterward as sheer terror, holding on to a thin hope that she might catch herself somewhere on the way down. She fell roughly 250 feet down the mountain. There was nothing on that slope for her to grab. Grace Roloff's death did not stay a private tragedy. Her father spoke publicly in the months that followed, describing what he had seen and pressing the National Park Service to rethink a cable system he came to see as unnecessarily dangerous in bad weather. His account put a face and a voice to a stretch of granite that had killed before and would again, and it forced a conversation the park had been having with itself for years. Half Dome has taken lives on those cables before hers, and since 2006, at least 6 people have died after falling from the cables during storms, when rain turns the granite into something closer to wet glass. In 2010, the National Park Service tried to address the crowding it believed was contributing to the danger, capping the summit at 300 people a day and requiring hikers to win a permit through a daily lottery just to attempt the climb. The idea was that fewer people on the cables at once would mean fewer accidents. A study, published years later in the journal Wilderness and Environmental Medicine, found the opposite. After the permit system went into effect, the rate of incidents per person on the cables actually rose. Researchers pointed to a likely explanation. When a permit is hard to get, people treat it as their one shot, and they push forward in conditions they might otherwise turn back from. That tension sits underneath every version of this hike. People come to Half Dome to document something rare, a view very few will ever stand in front of, on a route difficult enough that reaching the top feels like proof of something. The cables are the last obstacle between them and that proof, but the same steel that pulls people upward has also been the last thing many of them ever held on to, and a sudden storm can turn a clear morning into the worst conditions on the mountain before anyone strung along the cable has time to climb back down. It is February 2, 2025, on the Canyon Overlook Trail in Zion National Park, Utah. A 37-year-old man is found dead on the trail that Sunday morning, and the timeline that follows shows just how fast the park's response moved once the call came in. The report reaches Zion shortly after 7 a.m., describing a possible fall on the trail. Hurricane Valley Fire and Rescue is first on scene, and the man is pronounced dead at approximately 7:40 a.m., where he is found. Washington County Sheriff's deputies arrive shortly after, confirming what the fire crew already knows. Canyon Overlook Trail is a mile long, running along the east side of the park above the Zion Tunnel, and it earns its name honestly. The path narrows in places to sandstone ledges with sheer drops on one side, no barrier beyond the rock itself, and it ends at an overlook that gives hikers one of the widest views in the entire park. The canyon floor spread out hundreds of feet below. That view is exactly why the trail draws the crowds it does. It's short enough for casual tourists to manage, and dramatic enough that almost everyone who reaches the end pulls out a phone before they do anything else. Few trails in Zion see more cameras per hiker. The recovery effort that followed reflects how seriously the park treats an incident on ground like this. More than 30 personnel respond in total, drawn from Zion's own search and rescue team, the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and Hurricane Valley Fire and Rescue. The Zion National Park Technical Search and Rescue Team assists directly with getting the man off the trail. His remains are transferred to the Washington County Medical Examiner for further examination, standard procedure for a fall of this kind, and the trail itself is briefly closed before reopening to the public. His name is withheld in the days after his death. Authorities confirm only his age, and the investigation into the exact cause of his death remains open. What the park and the sheriff's office chose not to say early on reflects the way they weigh a family's privacy against public curiosity, even in a case this visible. This wasn't Zion's only fatal fall within a few months, and it wasn't even the only one recent enough to still be fresh in the park's memory. The previous October, a 40-year-old man had fallen roughly 200 feet to his death while canyoneering with 3 others near the exit of Heaps Canyon, elsewhere in the park. 2 fatal falls in a single stretch of months on 2 different kinds of terrain are the sort of pattern that keeps resurfacing every time Zion's safety policies come up for debate. Much of that debate centers on Angel's Landing, the park's most famous and most dangerous hike, where a permit system now limits how many people can attempt the exposed chain-assisted climb to the summit on any given day. Supporters argue the permits cut down on the crowding that turns a narrow ridge into a bottleneck. Critics argue, much like the researchers who studied Half Dome, that limiting access can make people more determined to finish once they're on the trail, permit in hand, regardless of conditions. The canyon overlook death didn't happen on Angel's Landing, but it landed in the middle of that same argument. Another data point for a park already wrestling with how to keep tourists safe on terrain that was never built with railings in mind. What carried this case beyond Utah wasn't footage of the fall itself. No video has surfaced showing the man's final steps on the ledge. What carried it was national news coverage, including CBS News, built entirely from official statements, the sheriff's office timeline, and the same kind of park photography that makes Canyon Overlook a draw in the first place. It's a reminder that a camera-dense trail environment can produce a visual record of a tragedy even without a single frame of the moment itself, stitched together instead from every ordinary photo the public already had of a place like this. On March 16, 2009, Rhonda Casto set out on the Eagle Creek Trail in Oregon's Columbia River Gorge with her fiancé, Stephen Nichols. By the end of that hike, she had fallen more than 150 feet from a narrow stretch of the trail, and she did not survive. This case belongs on a list about trail deaths caught on camera only with a caveat attached, and that caveat matters. Casto's story was later dramatized in the documentary series Pushed to Death, a production built around interviews, reenactments, and courtroom testimony. No bystander video or trail camera footage of the fall itself has ever surfaced. What exists is testimony, forensic evidence, and Nichols' own shifting account of what happened on that ridge, not a recording of the moment she went over the edge. Anyone searching for real footage of Casto's death will not find it, because as far as the public record shows, it does not exist. Investigators noted that the damage was concentrated below the waist, consistent with a person who landed feet first after going over a ledge. Nichols was not arrested until February 2015, nearly 6 years after Casto died. In that gap, investigators built a case slowly, and Nichols moved on with his life. Nichols told interviewers that Casto had confided a fear of dying young, that she spoke about not living past 25 and asked him to promise he'd care for their daughter if anything happened to her. He also confirmed that months before the hike, the two of them had taken out matching life insurance policies on each other, $1 million apiece. Investigators noted the timing, and they noted his finances. In the year before Casto's death, Nichols had lost a large sum, reported at around $250,000, trading in the markets. A policy that size, taken out shortly before a fatal fall by a man who had just watched a fortune disappear, is the kind of detail that turns a hiking accident into a homicide investigation almost overnight. The suspicion around Nichols didn't stop at the insurance. An ex-wife had accused him, years earlier, of trying to suffocate her and push her over an 8th-floor balcony while the couple was living in China. An allegation a witness supported, but that never resulted in charges. It resurfaced the moment he became a suspect in Casto's death. Separately, prosecutors uncovered a sexual relationship between Nichols and Casto's younger sister, who was 15 when it began. Neither fact proved what happened on the trail, but together they built a portrait of a man willing to cross lines most people wouldn't, and that portrait followed him into every courtroom hearing that came after his arrest. In May 2017, with a murder trial still ahead of him, Nichols pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide and coercion, and separately to sex abuse charges. He received credit for time already served and walked out of custody without ever facing a jury on the murder charge. Casto's mother has said plainly that she believes Nichols pushed her daughter off that trail, and that his lesser plea was not justice. The Casto case earns its place here not because a camera caught her final seconds, but because so much of the public came to believe it had. The documentary reenactments, the news specials, the courtroom footage circulating online, all of it created the impression of a visual record where none exists. It's worth remembering, especially on a list like this one, that not every haunting image people believe they've seen was ever actually filmed. Some of these deaths exist on video because a phone happened to be running at the wrong moment. Others exist only in the stories told about them afterward, reconstructed until they feel like footage even when they never were. Trails carry both kinds of record, the real and the reenacted, and the difference between them is not always as clear as it should be.